happening? Please tell me what's happening. Something gone wrong, like everything upside down, Lord. Right now, good bad is like this whole place gone mad. Every day is a hustle and a bustle. Everybody right now caught in the jostle for space in the race, trying to keep up the pace. But the space ram cram, everybody in a jamming.
I need a raise.
A life, a better way of living. In the meantime, simple things we forgetting.
Thank you so much to the wonderful folks out at Bermuda, the makers of Cracks Your Vital Supply, for powering our 7 o'clock news. Thank you so much. Make sure and pick up your cricks today wherever you are. Corner store, the shop, the parlor. If you say by the barber too. Yeah. Cricks, it's your vital supply. Alright, so thank you to the wonderful folks at Bermuda's. Alright. And of course, at 16 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock, while I get my guest online traffic-wise. Yeah, let me just not tell you about traffic. Any accidents? I'm looking. No. Let me not tell you about traffic, alright? Even that alone, that says volume right there. Alright, so while we get the guest, the guys online, guest online, I should say, let's get the results of our morning poll.
Our poll this morning was, do you think the Prime Minister did in fact interfere by giving Blissy Prasad the info that affected the merit list? We had 27 people voting on the poll this morning. Of the 27, 20 of you said yes, 7 of you said no.
As you said earlier on, Richard, and if you could turn on your camera, please, sir. The Prime Minister's action did result in some way in precipitating quite a series of events thereafter. So, interfere may not be the word, but he certainly impacted the Police Service Commission's operations, so much so that some may suggest it may have contributed to its eventual collapse, because they withdrew the list. And as they said, we don't even know how far the list went at that point. Anyway, we're streaming on Facebook and YouTube now, just to let you all know.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Dorothy. And let's introduce the minister.
Good morning. We would like to welcome Minister of Trade and Industry, Senator Paula Scoon. Minister Goopie Scoon. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on the Power Breakfast Show.
Good morning. Good morning to you, Paul, and I think Mr. Ragoobarsingh is with you, and of course the listening audience. Happy to be with you this morning.
Right,
how are you this morning? I can't say happy Easter yet.
Yeah, good morning, Minister.
I know you're quite devout.
Not happy Easter, but Lent is also a very, very interesting period because it prepares you for Easter, and that's what's great about it.
Excellent. We have 3 main topics this morning. Let's start. Yesterday we asked a question, our morning question was, should the government do something about food prices? And if I'm not mistaken, Richard, the vast majority said yes?
Yeah, the majority of people said yes.
Said yes. I don't know what government can do. I know there have been some items put on a zero-rated list. Minister, give us your overview. Of course, we all know that the pandemic had interrupted supply chain, and now we have the Ukraine-Russia war, which may impact the price of wheat and as such flour. Is the government bracing for more price increases?
But it's not merely the government that is bracing for price increases, but the world is. And you have to understand the damage that would have been done on account of the pandemic, and not only the pandemic. Unfortunately, you had a lot of adverse weather conditions in a lot of producing countries last year: Canada, U.S., Australia, and of course, then in addition to the whole COVID direct implications on the labor force being available in many sectors to work, including the agricultural sector, you would have had also the shipping and logistics disruptions, etc., contributing to food price increases. Now, so you're understanding that this is a global impact, and if you have looked at the release coming out from the FAU at the beginning of March, you would have realized that the total across the board food price increase would have been 28%, which is quite substantial. And so that's not just, it's not the government, but in fact, all populations of the world having these extreme prices in food. So it's just not the Trinidad that's affected, the government that is affected. It is the global situation. And, of course, the war in Ukraine, the Russia-Ukraine war, has just worsened it. But if you thought that even the 28% that we would have seen a leveling off, and this is what we were looking for in 2022 as against 2021, and this is without the war, in January you would have had a 4% overall price increase, and 3.9 increase in February. By late February, the war came on, and that has had disastrous effects on global food security. And why is because that whole Black Sea region plays a major role in the global food system. And if I look at wheat and corn in particular, Russia and Ukraine amount to something like 30% of wheat exports, of the world's wheat exports. Corn, Ukraine represents 16% of the world's corn exports. And we know how important those products are to us and across the globe. But there is expected to be continued food price increases. But the concern is also not just the food price increases, but whether you would have food shortages. And that, to me, is the bigger issue, because some things you would want it in any price. The main thing is to be able to have it here and to make sure to have everything with us. That's the concern, because as you would understand, if you look at the makeup of our imports, we talked about a 5.7 billion TT dollar import in food, right? Well, that is food that we absolutely need to have, not the food that we're used to importing. And you're talking about your meats. A high portion of that is your meat, your margarine and shortening and oil products, all of your fats, your dairy products. Then
a two-part question, Minister. You mentioned a 28% increase a while ago. A two-part question. Yeah. One, and you said the bigger picture is availability of food generally. One, are smaller economies or smaller nations paying more because of the negotiating powers of the bigger nations, as we saw the tragedy of availability of vaccines earlier on in the pandemic? That's one. And two, if we are suspecting there may be actual food shortages, what is the government / the Caribbean doing to start to mitigate that, if anything's possible at all? Because then that turns it into a completely different conversation if basic foodstuffs become unavailable for even purchase.
Yeah, and I'm being very careful here, but I'm being also very realistic in terms of particular types of food. And the whole question is, what can you do? Well, before I go to, there's something you asked me before. It's the Caribbean. Yes, you mentioned the Caribbean. When we talk about a $5.7 billion food import in Trinidad and Tobago, the rest of the region, you're talking about $4 billion US. So you're talking about close to 20 in the vicinity of 25 million TT equivalent imported food into the region. So it's not just, I'm talking about, I'm showing you, try to show you the regional pressure in terms of food imports. Now, what are you going to do about it? It's not an immediate fix. I mean, government has attempted to do some things, and looking at the basic food prices, for instance, we have tried to keep that down by one, suspending, and this has been going on for a number of years, suspending the CET, the Common External Tariff, at a level of CARICOM on basic food items. So the basic food items that we import, your sugar, your rice, your flour, etc., all of these things, about 20 items or so that are coming in tariff-free, tariff-free, duty-free into the country. And then you would see that following the budget last year, we zero-rated a number of basic food items, and that amount, and whilst it may have been about 60, 70 products, when you're looking at the SKUs and the entire range, you were talking about thousands of products, and that would have included, again, your oils, your coffee, your tea, your juices, your vegetables, all the things, roti skins, etc. A lot of things, the VAT was exempted. So you already have, definitely on the basic items, you're zero-rated and you're suspended. And I'm looking to see what we may have left out, and I'm sure that conversation can be had had with Ministry of Finance as to what else we could look at. But not only that, we made sure that for the basic food items, the imports of the basic food items and medicines, etc., we made sure that that Minister of Finance did this, that we increased the level of foreign exchange availability to the Exim Bank, not only to supply foreign exchange to the basic inputs into manufacturing, but again for the direct imports of the things that we must have. So that we've done those three things, and of course we have the food monitoring mechanisms at the level of the Consumer Affairs Division. But that apart, the wider picture has to be what we're doing in agriculture and ensuring that there's food security locally. And that thrust has been ongoing, but intensified in the last year when the government made available some $500 million to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries in terms of that agriculture stimulus package to get particular projects going on and to get not just that, but to make lands available and to make monies available to agriculturists, not existing only, but new agriculturists in Trinidad and Tobago to expand food supply. And you would have seen also a number of public-private partnership arrangements as well for dairy, for instance, to increase our milk supply and our meat supply in Trinidad and Tobago. So those kinds of things, but and for that you have to rely on your medium and longer term views as to where you want to go with that. It's not
but Minister, if I may interrupt, but you're talking about a certain level of attention being paid in terms of the agriculture and what is happening in food and dairy, etc. Is there some sort of master plan that will expect these various sectors to decrease the food import bill by so much percentage points within 2 years, etc., etc.? Is there a master plan that correlates to a reduction in the food reduction bill so that we can see that we're making some definitive headway?
What I can say, I mean, I'm not responsible for that ministry, but what I can say, that is the approach. And I would like to think that work is being developed on that, on the particular items and components of a master plan, where we would be in the very same things we talked about: vegetable production, food production, dairy production, etc. So I would like to think that work is ongoing with the Ministry of Agriculture. But even at the level of the Ministry of responsible for youth development, there are also a number of agricultural initiatives. As I said, you have to take the medium, long-term view in this. And so the stimulus there in that ministry is to get youth into agriculture. So you're talking about new entrants, not only at the university level, to the extent where we would be giving them, the government would be giving them homesteads. And so a number of areas, pieces of land across Trinidad and Tobago have been identified for distribution, targeted at getting youth into agriculture and into hands-on agriculture as well. So there's a lot going on, and I know that there's some kind of plan, but in terms of the definitive details, I couldn't give you that. But again, what we have to do...
But do you think that, because we spoke to Rajiv Dipti, the president of the Supermarkets Association yesterday, Minister Goopie Scoon, and yes, he was of the view, and I'll paraphrase, that not enough has been done. We know that we can't grow all the food we need, though we should be trying to grow more. That's understood. But more should be done to involve a more CARICOM-centric approach, where there's so much island space. Guyana, Barbados, Grenada, all these countries can grow different crops and export to each other in a more symbiotic manner. The shipping costs will be less, and it builds CARICOM as a region, and it provides a better food security blanket for the entire region as opposed to moving in silos.
He also talked about the under-resourced predatory unit.
Right. So I wouldn't give you too much information on the pre-deal larceny unit in the Ministry of Agriculture, right? Because that's something that the minister would be looking at. But I want to go back to the CARICOM issues and food security. And the lead head, as you know, CARICOM heads are responsible for various areas of development and growth within the region. So Guyana is responsible, the President of Guyana will be the lead head with responsibility for food and agriculture. And yes, he did last year present a plan for food security for the region. And that plan is being activated at the level of the heads of government. And as you rightly said, you have to look at the synergies. It has to be a synergistic approach because Guyana is the one with the land spaces. And I know that Guyana of its own has begun to grow, has strong acreages in several vegetables, and I think they have started corn and wheat and that kind of thing. But it has to be that approach, and in terms of security, in terms of Guyana being the area that will focus on.
Does that plan include? Yes, Guyana can grow the food because it has land space, and the other Caribbean countries like Cuba that we may not be CARICOM, but Caribbean that we can engage. But does that plan include providing more raw material, for example, for Trinidad and Tobago manufacturers to up there? Okay.
That is another area that, in terms of the medium-term view, and the work is going to be done on strengthening the linkages between industry and agriculture. That's what you're talking about, so that there's better synergy with the domestic or the regional agricultural sector and industry. And so that there's a working group on that to collaborate towards building those supply chain linkages between manufacturers and agricultural sector. And you would see an RFP going up pretty soon for a consultant by the Ministry of Trade and Industry to really look at these the regional value chains, which is wider than just agriculture. But one other study would be on strengthening the linkages again. So the work is ongoing, and we want to bring a consultant who can really drill down for us further on how we could get this working and just not talking about it. But there is a working group including the Ministry of Trade, TTMA, Ministry of Agriculture, and NAMDEFCO, and so on, looking at this whole collaboration in terms of the supply chain logistics linkages, between the two sectors. But
I'm going to cue Richard to introduce his favorite topic, ease of doing business.
Yeah, the ease of doing business, Minister. If you could talk about that, because for years, Trinidad and Tobago has been languishing below the midpoint in terms of countries being rated on the ease of doing business. And it seems as if there's some bogey with us moving up the ladder. What is accounting for our difficulty in making any tangible progress in terms of our rating internationally with regard to the ease of doing business?
So I'll tell you that work is ongoing. That's a fact. And there's no ease of doing index again. And the World Bank has not announced since 2019 its replacement for that ease of doing index, which we knew of before. Since then, now the ease of doing business is transferred into about 13 areas or so across to several ministries, etc. So that there are several ministries but responsible for fixing the ease of doing business. And the ease, what we know as the notion of ease of doing business extends beyond that World Bank index, and it is everything that affects doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. So if you're entering the country and there's an immigration issue or long line, that is looked at as the ease of doing business. What in the Ministry of Trade we're focused on, so there's an all-of-government approach with a focus, of course, on the ministry with digital transformation. That is not digitization and so on. Those are not easy and quick fixes. But there are things that we're doing, for instance, to increase both at the basic level, and COVID forced us to do that, to increase the accessibility to broadband across the nation. So those kinds of fixes, making sure that there are enough laptops in the hands of children, etc., so that they could have used it for school purposes during the COVID period. But that apart, a major issue for us in the ministry is trade and that which applies to trade and business. And over time, from 2009, when this TT business was introduced, we now have something like 46 e-government, e-government. How do I put it? Services
Agencies?
available. Yes, 46. We have about 46 services. What we are doing now, again, focusing on trade and business. What we are doing now, for instance, with those 46 e-services, is ensuring that by January, all of those would have an online payment application. So it's one thing you would still able to transact and avoid time and money and going into places and so on, doing things electronically, but you were not able to pay. So what we are working on is those 46 elements, having aligned with it an online payment system. That apart, there is some progress. There was progress. For instance, we were the project managers for the Ministry of Planning with regard to construction permitting. And you realize that across the country now, Trinidad, that is, it's now going into Tobago. And because as project management, Ministry of Planning now has more or less taken over the entire thing. And there's only electronic applications for your construction permits. So that's progress. Sometimes I don't think we count our blessings, but that's progress.
Well, but while I agree with you in that way, Minister, with the greatest of respect, anybody who's trying to start or move a business process through in Trinidad and Tobago will tell you, one, the number of steps are not integrated. Two, there doesn't seem to be a monitoring mechanism institute in place to ensure that person is walked from the concept through the processes to the registration in a way that it reduces the number of days it takes to start and register a business and get it going in Trinidad and Tobago. So while you mentioned the 46 services earlier on, the problem is that people going into the system, trying to start businesses and run businesses, encounter this bureaucracy, and it ends up in 100 and how much days and pure frustration, so much so that WePay took their options out of Trinidad and Tobago, I think to Jamaica, because of the abject frustration they encountered in setting up a wider operation here.
Right. So, for instance, the AG's office is working assiduously on decreasing the number of days it takes to start a business and the attendant processes. So, and you will find a reduction in the more short term in terms of that particular process. But on a wider basis, again, in April, the Ministry of Trade and Industry will launch its Trade and Business Information Portal. And that in itself will allow the customer to go online and view step-by-step regulatory guidelines across the entire spectrum of trade and business, so that users will not have to go to the various websites, to multiple websites, or conduct any in-person visits and so on to understand what do I do to conduct trade, business, and investment.
And that's great, so, but are there agents assigned when someone signs on to make sure that their process is seamless and that they're going through in a way that directly impacts the investor? Yes.
And so that TT BizLink is live, and that these officers are available to not 24/7, but 8 hours a day to attend to any difficulties, which is the regular working hours. But I'll tell you something. This portal will be able to connect you. It's going to be significant to all of the processes, what you do, and it will cross agencies as well. It will also provide statistics as well. So I think this is the single reference point that we're going to launch in April. I think would give citizens the necessary knowledge and so on. And there is going to be available this centralized information portal. And there are a number of other things that we're looking at. The port and community system that I talk about all the time, and these projects are huge projects. I'll tell you the cost of that construction permitting system is $8 million. And so we're now looking at this PCS system, or we have been for the last 2 years, going through a CTB process that took mighty long, having to do an EOI and then having to redo the other processes, the RFP twice over. It takes a lot of time.
Do you think Trinidad and Tobago is competitive in terms of with that? And I know you said the ease of doing business index maybe no more, but in terms of us providing the facility, the enabling facility to attract investment here, to attract people who want to do business here. Are we competitive when we compare to our Caribbean counterparts?
Yeah, but this is not the only. And investments have been done across the world. But that apart, that's not the only reason why one would choose to invest in Trinidad and Tobago. The whole question of doing business. You would know that we have attracted major investments in the energy sector. The reason why? Because there's a natural resource available here, or several natural resources available in Trinidad and Tobago. So they have invested in Trinidad over the years. But there are other big factors, and that is our human capacity. And for instance, we're well-educated people. Then of course, the location of Trinidad and Tobago below the hurricane belt is another major factor. You would find that the cost of electricity, water, etc., is the cheapest in the region, and perhaps in the wider Latin American area. So there are several other reasons why persons would choose to do business in Trinidad and Tobago, or why, for instance, the manufacturing sector would do so well in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's because of all of these advantages. So there are definite cost advantages to doing business in Trinidad and Tobago, quality advantages in terms of the human resource capacity, and also our infrastructure generally, or road networks, etc. But I'm not saying that, I'm to say that the rest of the region cannot attract investments, different types of investments, on account, again, of their natural resource. The tourism sector has thrived in the rest of the region. And you would find that Jamaica is building a manufacturing sector as well. And I would think that, and my own view is that they're doing very, very well at that. And again, they would have some distinct advantage. Their labor costs would be very low, and then of course they're closer to they're also closer to America, to the U.S., and just being a few minutes away in terms of traffic. So I think we all have our advantages, but Trinidad and Tobago by far has the distinct advantage of lower energy costs and location costs and history.
I hear you, Minister, but I'm just wondering how, I hear Paul's question, how really competitive is Trinidad and Tobago? How energized are we to be competitive? I get all of the advantages that we have, but if you look at a simple example, for example, of the yachting industry and how it had been decimated over the years from what it used to be, and that takes advantage of the location. We are below the hurricane belt, at least for now, even though climatologists are saying that hurricanes are going to drift further south and drift further north. But the issue of what we have and how we monetize it and how we increase our competitiveness to be the best in the Caribbean at what we do, that sort of energy sometimes seems to be lacking.
Well, you ended there talking about the best in the Caribbean. We want everybody in the Caribbean to do well, because when they do well, we do well as well, especially with our manufacturing and so on. But going back to yachting, for instance, over the years, yes, we do have a distinct advantage, and not the advantage is not just the location. The advantage is also the skill set that we have built up in terms of the ability to do yacht repairs. Trinidad and Tobago, that's our distinct advantage, not necessarily. Yes, they as a safe haven during the hurricane season, but again, when you look at Jamaica, when you look at St. Lucia, Grenada, etc., more than ever Barbados, the beauty of those particular territories, there's the seas and so on, is an attraction as well. But that sector has been decimated largely because of COVID. But before COVID, we had some attendant problems in terms of piracy. And you would be surprised, one piracy attack would, yachties would just get onto their communication instruments, and it would have a devastating effect on the industry. But COVID dealt us a heavy blow in that whilst the other territories had found a way to deal with the yachting entrance to their immigration issues, Trinidad and Tobago kept its borders closed, and we lost out on the entire season. And that's why entire hurricane season in 2021, and that has brought us to a place where we are close to zero in terms of the number of foreign yacht arrivals. So lately, and I don't want to go into this because the public is well aware that we have put $10 million into getting all of these micro and small businesses going again. But of course, what we have to improve is the marketing and promotion, and we're working on that in terms of the advertisement in foreign magazines, etc. And it's a double-pronged approach. But again, there are other ministries that are connected, and I meet this week with Minister of National Security on working on issues as well at the level of immigration and the Coast Guard. And of course, we have to also meet with customs as well, because we have to be a friendlier nation from the time someone arrives. And that single harmonized form that we talked about, moving away from 13 forms to one form, he did what he had to do in terms of passing it through the parliamentary process. But again, it has to be put into place electronically as well, so to ensure that before the authorities even arrive in Trinidad and Tobago, they have the all clear in terms of their entrance requirements. They're able to submit way before they arrive and so on. And that's where we have to go, looking at all the gaps and fixing them, making sure that when a yachty comes into Trinidad and Tobago, they don't have to enter Trinidad, and when they want to go to Tobago.
Before we run out of time, I want to go back to the food issue and ask, because it may seem like a redundant question. I mean, what is the role of the Consumer Affairs Division presently?
But Consumer Affairs really is a monitoring mechanism, so that we will monitor food prices, hardware prices, poultry prices, etc., publish on the social media, and once a quarter put it into the print media as well. But so it's a monitoring mechanism. They go around to all of the supermarkets across Trinidad and Tobago, so that when they present, it's an ongoing exercise. They can present what is going on in east, north, south, west of Trinidad and Tobago, so that they are on the road doing that. They are monitoring. But to bring food prices down, people always point to consumer affairs, but to bring food prices down is really a lot of other issues that you have to deal with, which we were talking about.
So people have the power of choice, and that's why I asked the question about the mandate of the Consumer Affairs Division. Do you think part of that mandate should be the promotion of the use of local produce, so that we start re-socializing or re-engineering the taste, the palate of the population to using more local produce? It helps our local farmers, it helps our local manufacturers, it boosts, it can have a long-term effect, a medium to long-term effect of reducing the dependence on the importation of foreign goods in Trinidad and Tobago, some of which are quite unhealthy, quite frankly. And do you think that should be part of the mandate?
Yeah, obviously. And what I tasked them to do last week was to set up a committee with Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, so that it can be a multi-pronged approach in terms of all the reasons why we should use local produce. And I mean, how long have we been talking about this, Paul?
Minister, can I tell you something with the greatest of respect?
Yes.
When you say I tasked them with that responsibility last week, I have to scratch my head.
Yeah. Because
the government has been in power since 2015. Food prices have been an issue, even though the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war has exacerbated the situation. But to hear that I tasked them with the responsibility to form linkages with the Agriculture Ministry last week, when this to me is a no-brainer in terms of that promotion of local goods and services and the use of it, it's kind of bewildering.
Yes. No, but it's not that they are not at work. This is further work to be done. And, of course, the Ministry of Agriculture itself has been doing its work through the promotion of the markets across Trinidad and Tobago. So it's in your face. You have a market next to you. It's not like going to the central market anymore.
And that's great. And I congratulate the Minister of Agriculture for doing that. I'm talking about in supermarkets. The preponderance of foreign goods, and of course, yes, we know we can't supply all our food, is in your face. Is there a thrust to link with the supermarkets, a local lane, buy local campaign, support this good, support this service, because it's in our interest to buy and support local? In a you and I know I owe. I don't know, you may be a younger person than me. But I remember in the 70s and early 80s, there was a strong thrust, a national campaign. One, grow a home garden, and two, buy local. That is not, has never been as fervent as I remember back then.
Yeah, but it's there. I mean, I won't take that poll, but because I think consumers are buying local, and there's a proudly produced in Trinidad and Tobago manufacturing campaign that has been ongoing for the last few years by the TTMA. Government doesn't stand alone. The responsibility is not government alone. And if you go to the supermarket and walk the lanes, I can't tell you separate local from foreign. The foreign goods are they take up less shelf space, without a doubt. Our local goods, as you walk through the supermarket, the variety and availability of locally produced goods are in your face.
But Minister, as well as I do in terms of consumer habits and marketing, it takes a lot more than just having it in your face.
No, there are two issues. One, we need to be able in Trinidad and Tobago to produce a wider set of goods. That is what, number one, we have to do. But in terms of what we produce being on the shelf, I would tell you that they are on the supermarket. They do have prominence on the supermarket shelves. But it's two things. We need to be producing more goods, a greater variety of goods. And the second thing is, we are a democratic country. And there is also a demand by a particular sector in Trinidad and Tobago for foreign goods. And this is why the duty, so if you walk along the produce lane in any supermarket, you would see that our local vegetables take up the larger space.
Agreed.
No two ways about it. But that smaller space where you have strawberries and blueberries, and you still have foreign lettuce coming into this country. I don't know why. It's there because there's a certain sector that will still buy it. They will still purchase it. But if you go, but the point is, you have to be realistic. You have to be realistic as to what we can produce and what we cannot. And if I go into the list, for instance, of food imports, we still are importing too much food. All of our meats are imported. So what we produce here is only chicken and fish. But if we still import, if I'll tell you, in terms of a significant, I'll tell you where the large numbers would be. We still import chicken, and that is a no-brainer. Nobody should be buying frozen chicken. This country should not be bringing in frozen chicken. We are still buying beef. Your pigtail is imported. A lot of pork is imported. Your salt fish is imported. We should not be having any imported salted fish in this country.
We don't grow turkeys. We don't grow turkeys here.
Well, who says you must have turkeys? But again, a certain population, and we all sensitize at Christmas time, we buying a turkey. We still import a lot of butter. We still import cheese, all of our vegetable oils, all of our soybean oil and so on, all of our powdered milk. I'm just being realistic.
So are you suggesting that we have a real potential to reduce those imports and use locally produced goods in those areas? Do you think we can do that?
I think there has to be and why I said yes, it's in your face, they're locally produced goods, but we're just not producing the things that we absolutely consume. That's a fact. So you're importing a lot of things. You say, okay, we produce flour, but all of the wheat, and wheat has been a major factor in terms of food price increases. All the wheat, etc., comes from abroad. We need to move away from French fries. So it's a whole deculturalization, a reculturalization in our people as to what we buy. But at the same time, there must be the availability. So when all of your KFCs are using French fries, and I mean, it's a continuing annual conversation with the importance of French fries. We need to replace with, and thankfully there's no dashing fries.
Can I join into some bacchanal?
Uh-huh.
Can I join into a piece of bacchanal?
Trinidad is bacchanal, tell me.
Are you going to pay for ketchup?
Tell me. Go ahead.
Are you going to pay for ketchup when you go to KFC?
If I'm going to pay for ketchup.
Apparently, you didn't see the news stories yesterday. Forget it. I was just running to some bacchanal. Richard, you're muted.
Oh, that's a new thing?
The ketchup, the KFC announced yesterday charging $2 for condiments now.
For condiments, yeah.
A furor on social media yesterday. So that's
$2 for two packs of ketchup, 1 pack of mustard, and 1 pack of pepper.
What I'd like to see you do.
Be careful where you tread, Minister.
Let me tell you, what I would like KFC to do, for instance, is to introduce dasheen fries, cassava fries, even if the cost is a marginally bit higher. Dasheen cassava, sweet potato fries, and locally produced pasta. End of story. In other words, the locally produced pasta, I think, might be a tad bit higher than the imported fries. But I'm sure that people will be, a vast amount of the population may pay extra to get their cassava, dasheen, and fries and so on. And we now have a producer in Trinidad who can do significant enough volumes of these products to the extent that the inputs are available in terms of the available dasheen.
Well, I'll tell you, we're doing much better with chocolate, the variety of chocolates available locally, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
When it comes to chocolate and pepper, I think Trinidad and Tobago is well secured in those markets, at least locally. That a lot of that is purchased locally. But the issue of corporate culture, which I think is what you're touching on, Minister, and changing corporate culture to include more local items on their menus is surely a conversation that, if not yourself, the Prime Minister can have, since a lot of the leaders of these institutions have communication channels with any government.
Yeah, the conversation is there, but of course, the big stick approach would be your CET weapon, which is your common external tariff. So those are some of the things. And as I touch on that, let me inform you that there's a Caribbean-wide, CARICOM-wide, common external tariff review that's going on, where as you know, the CET was introduced sometime in 30 years ago, and so that at that time the production realities were not as it is today, and therefore that we have to do this exercise to address the deficiencies of the CET system, where we would protect and to support. And you know, in the last few years we haven't been using the word protect, but countries in the world are now using protectionism mechanisms. But that apart, we are well entitled to look at our CET, and that is again to encourage, to protect what is produced locally, and as again to and have this deterrent there in terms of the CET, the duty on imports. That's an ongoing exercise, I can tell you.
As we close, let me just drop one more peacock. I think I'll file a question today on what the Ministry of Trade is doing to protect us from having to pay for condiments.
That's a new one. I didn't realize.
I am just joking, before somebody pick it up and say.
But I'm going to have that conversation about that. I think it should be a built-in price. And what they're saying is increasing the price of the box of the product. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing, but trying to hold the basic item, the chicken and chips, hold the price, but increasing the price on the additions. But
where's the private enterprise? They can do what they want. Consumers have choice, I'll always say.
But the consumers have choice. But for how long have consumers been eating KFC several times a week? Right? I don't know about you, but I can tell you, for me, I don't, and I shouldn't use the KFC brand because there are other brands, but I don't use chicken and chips from a store. I don't buy it at all. If I feel for fried chicken, I make it at home because we produce local chicken. And it's so easy to put it in a bag of dry seasoning and fry or put it in the oven. Or
Is the
fry it.
convenience to some people? Is the convenience as simple as that? Minister, we are at time. We want to thank you for being with us this morning.
The convenience must be never leaving your home and spending your time wisely instead of looking for that.
I don't think
Yeah.
Mr. Mateo will like that at all.
No, I'm not. You again. Why are you going? There are a number of
Fried
entities
chicken
that
brands.
can- Yeah.
Part of the business environment. Thank you so much, Minister Goopie. Scoon. We appreciate
Yeah,
your time and
yes.
your contribution this morning.
Lovely chatting. All the best.
Same to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Recording stopped.
I don't think Mateo will like that at all.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
still
you are right. A lot of it is convenience. A lot of it
It's
is
convenience. It's convenience.
a lot of it
and-
is
and
also
marketing
a lot
and
of it
habit
is-
forming.
a lot of it is also price.
Yeah, it's easier to run in and pay. What's the price now? So I don't know. It's $23, but $27. I don't know what the price.
I'm not so sure. They have all sorts of deals now, and they have also deals online and stuff like that. But it's convenience.
It's convenience
It's part
and
of,
grab and
it's
go.
part of the convenience culture.
and,
that-
and a developed palate too.
Yeah.
Part of it is that is a marketing.
But a lot of
marketing
fast
strategy.
food is about convenience.
It's about
It's about
convenience.
especially parents who are both working. They come
You have
home
three children. You're working,
and you're
whole
like,
day.
you know what?
Yes.
Let's get pizza
grab it.
tonight.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the kids love it. So
Yeah. And Trinidad is a chicken country, yeah? So
yeah, so that's why the businesses do well. It's a good business model because it's a developed taste and kids like it.
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Gentlemen, let's get into our news brief. All courtesy Champlain Auto Services, the dancer, the singer, the Winagilevy is in.
This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.
The government has been ensuring that the agriculture sector gets a boost